a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us this 8th day of November 2022. You're watching M Live. My name is Zainab Ismail. Lots to discuss today. We'll be taking a look at what's been happening and the developments in the political world. It is the state of the nation, and we'll be delving much deeper into some of those issues. But first, we'll take a look at some of the stories also informing the basis of our conversation and also what is in the dailies. Let's begin with those stories. Now, the standoff between the pilots and the employer Kenya Airways continues as both parties maintain their hardline stance. Thousands of passengers, on the other hand, are still stranded as the pilots' strike continues into day 3. The Pilots Association now says that they are not relenting on their demands, with the national carrier insisting that disciplinary action will continue. As Leila Mohammed reports, KQ has already begun advertising for the positions of pilots and first officers.
For the third straight day, passengers heading into various destinations in Southern Africa and Europe gather at this tent, waiting to know how soon they will depart the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport.
And today we come back at the airport to have another flight.
This French family arrived in Nairobi from Johannesburg last Friday and says that despite assurances that they will get a flight back to their home country, they are still stuck here for another week.
But it's also cancelled.
They are among 500 passengers accommodated at various hotels in the city at the expense of the Kenya Airways due to flight delays.
We are a little bit tired, and we don't have our passports. We don't have our clothes because our luggage stay in the airport.
The frustration of those heading into Johannesburg was evident as their flight scheduled for Monday morning was cancelled without much detail on how soon they will travel.
Really losing a lot of time and affecting quite a lot of critical areas of work. So it's really discouraging. I'm just hoping that there'll be an end in sight.
That dream may not be a reality soon, as fresh statements from both parties Monday afternoon affirming that no talks would happen until each party's demands are first met. In a statement Monday evening, the company issued a notice of immediate withdrawal and/or termination of the recognition agreement and the CBA signed between KQ and CALPA.
Contrary to reports circulating that we have refused to negotiate, we would like to clarify that we have made all attempts to bridge the gap between Kenya's management and ourselves.
There is no negotiation. I want them to go back to work because they're costing us a lot of money. They're sabotaging this country. They have been belligerent.
The Ministry of Labour, on the other hand, granted the Kenya Airways management the go-ahead to take any appropriate action against the striking employees. Kilavuka says that disciplinary processes have begun, and once the appropriate procedures are followed, some may be forced to exit the company, even as he now says that legal action is also on the cards.
We filed a suit this morning for contempt, but like I said, we lost a lot of money, right? So people have to be held personally and jointly responsible for the losses and damages to this country, to this airline.
By Monday afternoon, the Employment and Labour Relations Court had issued summons to 11 CALPA members to appear before the court on charges of disobeying court orders. KQ has also said that the immediate withdrawal from the existing CBA is due to the fact that the law processes and court orders need to be respected by all. Pilots, on the other hand, say they have played this out with open hands and want nothing but their collective bargain agreement to be honoured.
Our contractual pension provident fund costs the company only 60 million shillings a month for all 3,800 Kenya Airways staff. Yet, inexplicably, he is willing to let the company lose 300 million shillings a day.
With 20% of disrupted flights back in the air for Kenya Airways, it is the passengers heading outside the African region who are mostly affected now. And they are worried when next they will be able to board into their last destinations, as many have been in the country for more than 4 days now.
Unfortunately, we have had to cancel 47 flights today because of lack of crew.
The current grounding by the carrier is doing serious damage to not just their revenue in the minds of many.
It is really damaging the reputation of the country. So I think government should calm down.
With the situation not finding a middle ground Monday, many more passengers will be back at the airport Tuesday, hoping to get the first flight out as the standoff continues with both parties engaging in court. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
All right, well, away from that, Kenya borrowed a total of $5 billion or just about 440 billion shillings at the 2014 exchange rate from the Export-Import Bank of China to finance the standard gauge railway. Well, the borrowing was done through 3 financial agreements, 2 of which are market-based and 1 being based on soft loan terms. A Business News editor Julian Amboko now unpacks the details of the SGR financing.
Few infrastructure projects have stoked unrelenting controversy more than the 3,800 kilometers long Mombasa-Nairobi standard gauge railway, whose construction began in 2013 and was completed in 2017.
So my first responsibility when I get to office is to find where the agreement is and give it to the people of Kenya through Parliament.
The financing agreements released by Transport Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen now show that the first tranche of the SGR financing is for a loan to the tune of $1.39 billion, just about 123 billion shillings. The loan matures in 20 years and its interest rate is agreed to be 3 percentage points above the London Interbank Offer Rate, popularly known as LIBOR. The loan enjoys no grace period, which would ideally have granted Kenya breathing space as far as servicing payments is concerned. This loan is guaranteed by funds in the Railway Development Levy Fund. The second tranche of the SGR financing is for a loan to the tune of $2 billion or just about 176 billion shillings. The loan matures in 15 years and has no grace period. The pricing of the loan is agreed to be 3.6 percentage points above the London Interbank Offer Rate, implying this tranche is more expensive than the first tranche of 123 billion shillings. This loan is guaranteed by funds in the Railway Development Levy Fund, an escrow account capitalized with 25 billion shillings and a long-term financing agreement encompassing the Kenya Ports Authority. Pundits now argue that the pricing of these 2 loans is punitive to the Kenyan taxpayer.
It's quite worrisome. If you compare with the concessional loans, at least the maturity is more or less paid as the interest payment is paid. Part of the principal, for instance, that $1.6 billion or $2 billion will have been paid in as with each interest payment as they come due.
The third financing agreement under the SGR contract provides for a soft loan. The $1.6 billion financing, or just about 141 billion shillings, is a 20-year loan with a 7-year grace period. This loan was structured with an upfront payment of $4 million or just about 352 million shillings by the Kenyan taxpayer as management fees. The latest external debt register covering the period to June 30th, 2019 showed that Kenya has made payments worth 9.9 billion shillings in servicing the SGR loan. During his vetting, Transport Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen expressed concerns regarding the structuring of the SGR financing.
The problem, Mr. Chair, with the SGR is that we took a loan of 20 years on an infrastructure of 100 years. It becomes impossible to be able to pay that loan by revenue that comes from the railways.
Julius Amboko, NTV.
And we'll certainly be interrogating more on the SGR deal and really what is inside. Now, the Jubilee Party is now up in arms over the nomination of Isiolo Senator Fatuma Dulo to the prestigious Parliamentary Service Commission, insisting Sirisia MP John Waluke is the party's candidate of choice. Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni has accused the National Assembly leadership of shortchanging Waluke and threatened that the party will move to court if Waluke's name is not back on the list. The names are set to be debated Tuesday afternoon.
Jubilee Secretary General Jeremiah Kioni has been on his phone for the better part of Monday evening, seeking to marshal the support of the opposition coalition to reject a list of nominees to the influential Parliamentary Service Commission, following the dropping of Jubilee nominee Sirisia MP John Waluke.
And according to the mover is that
on Tuesday's National Assembly order paper, names from both Kenya Kwanza and Azimio One Kenya are said to be debated and approved. From Jubilee, it is the inclusion of Isiolo Senator Fatuma Dulo that has kicked off a storm, considering the party had proposed someone else.
We sat as the leadership of Azimio and agreed that Jubilee's candidate for the PSC will be John Waruke. And in that meeting, we had even the presence of the Azimio presidential candidate, His Excellency Raila Amolo Odinga.
Last week, Kioni visited Waluke at the Industrial Area Remand Prison, where he is awaiting a determination of his bond appeal, and presented him with a copy of his nomination letter that had been presented to National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula. Kioni wants Dulo to step aside immediately or face disciplinary action from the party.
So I do not understand how the name of Fatuma Dulo, who we give as our whip at the Senate, would then occupy the position of a Parliamentary Service Commission. How she do even relinquish a position and take another one. It is something that is not within the know of Jubilee.
NTV also understands Azimio One Kenya leader Raila Odinga, who is currently in Egypt for the COP27 conference, has waded into the controversy, insisting the choices have to be reversed.
We will not want to make it untidy, because what then it means that we will need to seek for legal intervention if that finds its way on the floor and it is passed, because that's not the party.
The ODM party has presented Likoni MP Mishimboko's name, while Wiper has presented Mavoko MP Patrick Makau's name, thus sealing the National Assembly positions.
It's really bad when you
if Jubilee's slot has been reserved for the Senate by the Azimio One Kenya coalition, then the Jubilee party would either have to accept Senator Dulo's nomination or present another name from the Senate, or just renegotiate with the coalition partners. Kennedy Muredhi, NTV.
We cannot afford to waste time skirting around issues. Delays will make us busy spectators as calamity wipes out lives and livelihoods. Now, those were the words of President William Ruto when he addressed the World Leaders Summit yesterday evening at the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Ruto called on delegates to address loss and damage, especially now when poor countries are suffering some of the worst impacts of climate change. Already, the current drought has killed more than 2.5 million heads of livestock, has cost Kenya's economy more than $1.5 billion in losses. And TV's science editor Zainab Wandati, who is at the COP, gives us the latest.
On this first full day at the COP27, three key things have happened for Kenya today. The President has met with the Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak, in a private meeting where they signed an agreement to extend over $500 billion to Kenya between now and 2025 to finance Kenya's activities in climate-proofing the economy of Kenya. And another thing that the President has also done today is that he has also signed another bilateral agreement with a private investor who will build a hydrogen power generation facility in Kenya. And there was also another agreement signed for 300 megawatt capacity generation of green ammonia and green fertilizer facility in Kenya by 2025. Those are just some of the bilateral agreements that the President was engaged in today, and he also addressed the World Leaders Summit. We expected this address to be much earlier in the day, but it was delayed by a couple of hours. We are not sure why, but he went to address a side event that Kenya was hosting on forestry. And one highlight that came out of there is that there was this little girl there, little Miss Environment Kenya, Karen. She's 9 years old, and she attended that side event, and she had a couple of questions to ask the President.
How are you going to make sure trees planted in dry areas do not dry off because of lack of rain? The second question is, wild animals are drying up because of drought in Kenya. I have seen more than 100 elephants died, which is very sad. My question is, how are you going to save the wild animals from drought? Thank you.
Your two questions are significant and they are very important. We already changed the model in Kenya, just to respond to what you've said, that we no longer are talking about tree planting, we are talking about tree growing, so that we must have a plan beyond planting the tree. This morning, I was having a conversation that for the first time in Kenya, we are setting aside finances to feed our wildlife and to make sure that our wildlife have access to water. For the first time, in fact, this weekend, just last weekend, in Savo, we are spending 200 million shillings to make sure that we keep our wildlife alive.
I think those were pretty impressive questions Karen had for the president there. And while he was rushing off to the World Leaders Summit, we weren't able to speak to him. We did hope to speak to him today, but given how late, how fast the time had moved, he rushed off to go and address the World Leaders Summit. But tomorrow he'll have another very packed day. He'll be attending another event hosted by the Global Center on Adaptation, and he'll be one of the presidents to attend that summit and to attend that side event and also address it. And I should also mention that former Prime Minister and Azimio principal Raila Odinga has also arrived in Sharm el-Sheikh. Will be getting his attention over the next couple of days, and we'll be catching up with all these leaders from the country who are here. Even Safaricom CEO, by the way, is also here, and we'll be catching up with them over the next couple of days to see why they are here and what the agenda is on climate change and how they intend to take the lessons or the discussions and the decisions made here and scale them down to the people of Kenya.
All right, thank you, science editor Zainab Wandati, who's following up on those climate talks there in Egypt. And that is a report she filed yesterday. So, of course, today we'll be getting more details of the talks as they continue. Now, a follow-up meeting emanating from a peace deal signed in South Africa 5 days ago involving the Ethiopia forces and those from the Tigray region, bringing together generals from the two forces, has been held in Nairobi. The meeting was spearheaded by former President Uhuru Kenyatta and former President Olusegun Obasanjo. The meeting was held amidst a deal for cessation of hostilities between the two forces and an agreement for disarmament in the coming days. The meeting brought together top generals from the two forces, who have also agreed to forge a better working relationship that will herald a new beginning and a possibility of forming one force.
His Excellency President Olusegun Obasanjo, Hassan Berhanu Julie, Chief of Defense of the Ethiopian Defense Forces.
I hope, and very seriously so, that within the next month or so, we will have reached a point where we can say uhuru.
Indeed, it is a meeting of colleagues who know each other, and colleagues who I am certain at the conclusion of this process will be colleagues who will be working together for the betterment of their country, for the betterment of Ethiopia, for the benefit of our region, and ultimately join us all in our struggle to make Africa a better place and to end and silence the guns permanently so that we can focus on the well-being of our people.
All right, now before we get to the papers, just one more story that is developing quite fast. And students and lecturers from various universities across the country are now demanding that Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Mashogu retracts his remarks on university funding, which have caused an uproar across the country. Speaking on Saturday at the Dedan Kimathi University of Technology, Mashogu said the government will no longer fund public universities. Thus, they should be able to find a means to generate their own own sourced revenue in order to stay afloat rather than relying on the government. On the other hand, the university's academic staff union has said that in the event the CS does not retract his remarks, this will now give public universities a leeway to charge university fees at the market rate, a move that will affect many students who are unable to cater for their education. Helen Aura has that story.
A number of our universities are faced with problems, particularly finance. You get them complaining about underfunding, and we are encouraging that they must generate their own revenue, because the exchequer, as it is now, is not going to be able to continue funding more.
The ripple effect stemming from the above remarks made by the Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu at the Dedan Kimathi University of Technology on Saturday. With the university's academic staff union, UASU, as well as student leaders from various universities in the country weighing in on the matter.
We are going to address this issue in every avenue possible. We'll go to court because it is an issue, it's a constitutional issue. We will go to the streets. If they want us to go that way, then we will go.
That the government is not going to fund universities has this implication. It means now he has given universities free will to charge fees at market rate. That is the implication.
UASU has also called out the government for continuous allocation of funds to private institutions to support government-sponsored students. This despite the underfunding crisis in public universities.
We must regain our glory in this country. Education is key to all of us. Students from poor backgrounds, I come from Bungoma, from the village. If the fee is going to be cut, that means I'm going to drop out of school. Where does the government want me to go?
They want the Ministry of Education to engage them on the matter in a bid to find a solution. Helen Aura, NTV.
All right, so that's the development on the education front. We'll be touching base on that as well. But I'm not alone in studio, as always, Tuesday, State of the Nation, what's happening in the political world. And joining me in studio right now, Dunstan Omari, Wakili, political analyst. Thank you so much. Good morning. Karibu Tena from last week. Also, Ishmael Nyaribo, Wakili, and also political analyst. Thank you so much for also coming in this morning. And also joining us today this week is Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst. Karibu sana, Arnold. All right, so before we even take a look at the newspaper, that's the latest that is happening on the education front, and it is quite a big issue right now because a lot of concern from learners and guardians across the country, especially those in university. So you have the Cabinet Secretary for Education, who's quite new in this administration, making such remarks, and there are threats that have come with those remarks. I'm going to start with you, Akili Dunstan. What do you make of the situation right now in terms of the education sector, touching on the issue of universities and government saying, look, we cannot fund you anymore?
This is bottom up. This is what Kenyans are going to live with. The reality is that nobody in government thinks about the impact of the policies that they are coming up. When you tell university students that the government is not going to fund, I have been a university lecturer for 10 years. Understand what that means, though in a private university. The government funds all the salaries of all university lecturers. The government funds a certain percentage of the tuition fees that students are supposed to do directly. Then the government funds through HELP, the Higher Education Loans Board. 99% of the graduates in this country have graduated out of that government funding. Now government is saying they will not fund. What is the alternative? Universities cannot close. They will charge fees. And that's what the union is saying.
At market rate.
At market rate.
Right.
Market rates where I've been in a private sector university, market rates, we are talking of poor students who were educated by CDF. Remember, CDF now is not there. Students Form 1, Form 4, who are beneficiaries of CDF under this government are not going to school. They are at home because CDF was disbanded. Number 2, these poor students are already going to university courtesy of help. There is no funding. Third, the kids and children of these people giving these policies never go to any public university. All of them. All the kids of the rich people go abroad or they go to private universities. So the question that everybody is asking, where is the Kenyan poor mother, the Kenyan poor father, the so-called hustlers are going to get fees to pay for their university? You are talking of, for example, when I went to law school, in 2006 to 2008, fees at the University of Nairobi for an LLB degree was 670,000. Now, the rate might be some 2-3 million. Who is going to do law in this country other than kids of the rich people? So really, this is a government that does not understand what Kenyans want. Telling the students that they will not pay, they will have got to pay fees, is a serious, serious question. And you have seen the students are saying they are going to the streets. We have not even dealt with the Kenya Airways issue. We are now coming to bring student unrest. You remember there's a time, Zainab, when all universities were up in arms, demonstrating, throwing stones and all over. That thing ended. Now this government is taking the students there because that is the bottom-up plan. It is wrong. It is uncalled for. It is irresponsible to start to destabilize the education sector that is still fighting. It is still fighting to revive from COVID effect. Okay. Now, where are those students going to go?
Let's hear from Arnold and get to Wakili Ishmael. What do you make of this, policy declaration? Of course, there has not been any engagement with stakeholders at this point.
I'd like to look at Waziri's declaration in the context of other declarations that have been made by other CSS. I think the Kenya School of Government really needs to up its game when they are inducting these guys, because you've seen a number of CSS come up and make very funny declarations. Just the other day, and I don't want to get into the others, but you've seen a lot of uproar from the declarations being made by CSS who are a day or two old in office. So I would like to look at it from that particular, in that context, that a number of them really have not gotten a proper brief. There is need for capacity building for these guys when they come in, because a number of them might have been very good politicians or technocrats from wherever they've come from, but they have not really done government. So they did not understand how these processes go about. And also, the media is here. There is a way you guys get the angle of a story. Out of everything he spoke, of course, you look for a hook that you hang on the entire story. But it is a fact that has it's true. That's why I'm saying that from all that he said, you pick one point, and that's what we call an angle. You hang on a story, the hook on which you hang on the entire story. So there's the issue of not understanding office. There's the issue of capacity, briefing from the ministry or the dockets they are holding. And then, of course, I understand policy cycle. A roadside declaration like this cannot influence a policy framework. It might actually be a pointer towards probably where he thinks that they are going, or from the briefing he had. But I think this particular declaration was insensitive. Because I look at him and I think he also just came up via help. I don't think he's
a University of Nairobi student.
He's a University of Nairobi student of the days of old. Guys who actually survived via boom and had everything. Their parents paid nothing. The villagers would actually send them with a little bit of fare, and that was all.
But suddenly touched a raw nerve.
Yeah, so, but then the bigger picture is this. Besides looking at these insensitive remarks, not well thought out, the stakeholders have not been involved, I think that we also need to review the higher education framework. Because the problem of underfunding is a perennial one. In our laws, by the way, we actually have got even a 5% ambition towards putting money towards higher education and research, even at county level. That has not been done. Okay. So there is need for us to have a national conversation.
Okay.
And even as he does that, you can't just go throwing around statements. I think William actually needs to call his CSS to order. Because the things these guys are saying, so the other one comes up, the other day speaks about Mitumba, the other one comes up, and they are saying all manner of things, and they don't even have PSS in office. Substantive PSS are then the ones they're actually going to work with going forward. So for me, it's a mixture of so many things, and anyone who's handling the CS communication, the education CS communication, actually needs to come out, first of all, retract that or put it in context, and also just ensure that we have got things going forward. We have not dealt with KQ, for example, like he said. Now students are threatening to go to the streets. We've got lecturers and everybody else. So exactly, that's not how you start to run a government from the beginning.
All right. Yeah. Wakili Ishmael.
Yeah, I don't want to intoxicate or rather add or minus what my colleagues have said, especially, you know, Arnold being a policy expert. But remember, Machogu has been in government. You must appreciate that he's been a DC, I think.
A senior DC.
Yeah. So he actually he really knows what government should do. But I agree entirely then that he ought not to have made such a statement. Government, sponsored universities are more like state parastatals. Yeah. How do you come and just using a microphone completely say there is no parastatal, and this money they are saying which goes into the university now, so where will it go? People should not start preparing our minds that we intend to eat or we intend to misuse public resources. Right. This money that goes to for example KQ, which now has a problem, it has some funding that comes from state, the parastatals, the university. So you're saying now we don't want to fund. You've not explained we want to utilize that money so that it goes to a certain project. So that will not argue well.
Yeah. Right.
So it's true that the statements they are making are haphazard. They should be controlled. Yes.
Okay. Let's get to the Daily Nation. This is what we have on the very front page of Daily Nation, and it will certainly be informing our conversation a little bit later on. Reversed. Well, Ruto has overturned over a dozen decisions made by Kenyatta, including restructuring government, revisiting cancelled multi-billion shilling projects, and scraping subsidies as he fashions his own administration in moves that appear to send a message that his predecessor got things wrong during his tenure. The president has targeted several policies, directives, and programs that were at the heart of the Uhuru administration. It's a full splash on page 7. Just a quick look at some of those shifts. There is the appointment of the 6 judges, reverting of the port operations and cargo clearance at the port of Mombasa. There's the issue of the scrapping of fuel and unga subsidies right as he was inaugurated, disbanding the DCI's Special Service Unit, transferring the National Police Service budget from the Office of the President to the Office of the Inspector General, and many others will come and look at that in a moment. But just a quick comment. I'll start with you, Arnold. When you look at the shift in terms of the directives and decisions that the president is making, sort of, carving out his own niche in his own administration, is it an indication of a failure by the previous administration?
Not entirely failure, but the reason why we go to elections periodically is so that we can live under a different dispensation and try out different ideas. So when the current president reverses a number of policy decisions and administrative actions by the predecessor, he is simply just trying to prepare the state. In his administration of the state and delivering his promises, he's simply trying to prepare the framework so that he can deliver on his promises. And I'd like him to actually not just go and look at those, what I want to call political decisions, reversing some of them that are big. It shouldn't be so personal, or rather we shouldn't look at it as personal, but then William has got Kenya and he has to deliver his promises. So for him to deliver his promises, he has to ensure that the architecture of state looks like what he wants or what can actually deliver on his promises. So it is fine, and I think that he will actually get deeper, because in the last administration, I don't want to call it failure, probably that was what they promised us and we didn't get it properly. There's quite a number of policy decisions that really need to be looked into. For a country, for example, that really is in need of jobs, you really need to review the enterprise development framework, for example, because the ecosystem, the business ecosystem in itself is actually, let's just away from DCI, away from recalling all these issues about the National Police Service and everything else. People trying to do business in this country are struggling. So we will come on such like platforms, speak about creating jobs and everything else. Yet, it's easy for anybody to tell you that BRS, the business registration service, is actually very efficient. But then, the way we say, the devil is in details. You try, for example, to do fintech. So you go get people who want to do investment in this particular country. CBK, for example, the Central Bank of Kenya, will keep you around for the next 1 year looking for a letter of no objection. So even as he speaks, and then you have got hundreds of young people who are coming from universities, probably thousands, who could actually benefit from that, such like an end. Then the regulatory framework would actually give you a lot of a headache. Same way, if you, Zainab here today, try to actually put up a media station, you will actually then meet the communication authority on the other side, and they'll be taking you around for the next 1 year. Same thing whether you want to put up a security business, for example. You have got people who are willing to pump in money. You go around. There's just a way we messed up the business ecosystem in the last 5 to 10 years.
So for you, this is him
this one is just
setting an agenda for his government
himself,
and nothing to do with any political moves?
Plus, whatever he wants to actually, if he's going to deliver the promises he had, he has to review a number of policies. For example, we have got a very funny decision that if you're going to deposit 1 million shillings, you must back up with the documents. If you're going to actually withdraw 1 million shillings, anything beyond $10,000 is, we have made doing business in this country so cumbersome. And we complain every single day about jobs. How are we going to create jobs when the business ecosystem is so difficult? So I want him to move beyond this. For me, I still feel this is cosmetic. Some of them are lightly politically pointed. There is so much that needs to be reviewed if we are going to move forward and take Kenya to actually the path it's been on. Otherwise, we are losing our competitiveness to our neighbors. That even for the first time now, Kampala looks like a financial hub of East Africa because we've come up with very funny laws and regulations.
Okay, let's hear from Dancer Naga to Ishmael.
Well, I have a list of decisions in Daily Nation, the prestigious newspaper, on page number 7. And is a litany of 16 things that the president has reversed. Out of those 16 decisions, these were cabinet decisions under President Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto. The cabinet met, decided that is the policy to go. The cabinet was appointed, the William Ruto cabinet was appointed not more than a week. They have not sat to deliberate these matters. By word of mouth or by an executive order, all these things have been made. And very soon, they'll be challenged in court because they are unconstitutional. The same way you have seen Machogu announcing some things without a cabinet resolution. This is a government of roadside declarations, from the head of state to the cabinet minister. So let not Ishmael or Arnold say that Machogu is wrong. That is the mode of operation under this government, where everybody is cabinet, full cabinet by himself. He can make a decision, he can implement it. Let us look, for example, these ones, we are talking about abolishing Kazim Tan, a very popular initiative to bring money to the. No alternative has been given.
But the president has come up from
no
his
alternative
manifesto.
as we are talking in West Mogrango constituency or North Mogrango or anywhere, no alternative has been given. Still the people who are getting unga from it are crying. They are waiting for the Hustler Fund on 1st of December. Number 2, we are talking about reverting the operations and cargo clearance to the port of Mombasa. How that will deal with the question of the countries outside. The port is not only a port for Kenya, it is a port for other regional countries. Uganda and other countries have already put their facilities at Naivasha. How it will open up, we'll deal with.
Let's do this, Wakili. So we'll come back and discuss this a little much deeper, right?
Yes.
So we'll brush through what is also in the papers, and we'll come back to this issue. Ishmael, you want to make a quick comment on this?
I believe. My honest view is that some of the, reversed policies deserved to be reversed. Some of them, and when he comes and says I have already asked Safaricom and the central bank to ensure that, not central bank, but Safaricom and I think NIC, who, I mean, Fuliza and Mshwari and all the charges, that they drop them by 50%. That is a populist statement, and it resonates very well with the public. And when he talks about these other reversals in terms of, $1 million shillings, he wants to ensure that people can walk around with more than that. Okay. There are some policies that are very good. I think we are only, really fighting with the way in which they intend to implement them. They come with a promise today, and after a week, you really do not see anything happening. That could be hot air, as I have seen Standard trying to.
Okay, so we have to take a break. Arnold, do you want to mention something?
To be fair to Kenya Kwanza, honestly, we actually need to look at this.
Right.
The first executive order, or rather literally the first business for any administration when they come in, is to organize government.
Right.
And then, of course, they have to continuously speak to us about their promises and the things they actually intend to do. So we are at a place, for example, we have got a very rigid legal framework on how you actually bring in a new government, how you win in the older government. We finished elections in August. Up to now, we've not even vetted PSS. It's not William's mistake. It's the framework we gave ourselves as a people. Up to now, counties are struggling. People are now vetting. When? We are in November, right? We are in November.
Right,
we
correct.
completed our elections in August. But counties are now vetting the chief officers, for example.
Yes.
People are still in court on so many things. So I think also as we move forward, the electoral ecosystem, again I'll use that word, needs to be reviewed. Because honestly, 2 months after we did an election, the other people who are in office are supposed to be exiting are unable to actually take decisions, consequential decisions. Because as an outgoing PS, how do I then come out and make a certain declaration? I have to prepare my office. Because I'm going out, I have got a predecessor who's coming in, but that predecessor cannot come to office until they are vetted. So parliaments, county assemblies, and the entire framework that we have is actually taking their sweet time. Because PSS, for example, are vetted by committees. We've made it to actually, we start vetting them next week.
All right.
And when these guys can actually, in committees, and we get moving, it's not like a difficult thing. We've made this particular process so difficult.
Right. Yes.
So I actually wanted to say this, that some of these decisions they actually are speaking to are not bigger things. They're saying, we will be opening up talks. We will be doing this. And even Kazim Mtani that he speaks about, it was not something that ran from January to January. It was seasonal. We had to look for money from World Bank, from other guys, and then tunashtua vijana na 3 months, and then run away, and then we don't pay them.
Only in 1 minute. Only a minute.
Less, all right. Yes,
Tell Arnold that this is a country governed by the law. William was elected through a process known by law. He will only govern this country by a process known by law. So the question about it takes long, that is the law. And we cannot avoid the law because of convenience.
And that's why I actually said...
And whatever, Arnold, you want to push the agenda is that all these decisions will be declared a nullity in a court of law.
Okay.
Because they have not complied with the procedures.
All right.
Let us, for
a
now...
declaration that I will open a conversation with the Central Bank of Kenya on the 1 million shillings
there is international law.
So let's
do this.
About
it's not.
Let's do this. Let's hold on to that conversation. We take a quick break. Yes, take your coffee, kidogo, and then we come back and we'll finish up on what is in the paper and suddenly get much deeper into that conversation. The hashtag to use this morning is MLive NTV. Talk to us at NTV Kenya, at Zainab Ismail. We will be back in a short while. Stay with us.
I know nothing about this, Dad.
How could Victoria have hidden all that money from me? I'll do whatever I can to stop her son from getting even a cent of that money.
My son always gets into trouble.
I promise you, I won't go looking for trouble again.
I was in my office the entire day.
Can someone back you up on that statement, sir?
We won't give up, right?
And we will not back down.
Go for gold!
Forever my love.
New Sensodyne Repair and Protect with Deep Repair. It's a huge game changer for me. The science is pretty amazing because it really goes deep inside the tooth and repairs tooth sensitivity. It's going to improve the quality of my life in a big way.
A boy who became a fan, who became a player, who became one of Barcelona's greatest. Gerard Piqué really did live the dream. But the dream is now over. Piqué retiring and finishing his career as he said he would at Barcelona. The dream has been lived, the career fulfilled.
Did you know you can open a family bank account without having to visit a branch? Simply download Pesapap app from Google Play Store or Apple Store to enjoy freedom and convenience. All you need is your ID card, KRA PIN, and camera phone.
Now this is what we call convergence. Come through for the morning fix this and every single Friday right here on MTV. Yes, it's about that time.
You know, the coolest thing about mornings is that a girl and two guys together in the mix, you never know what to expect. You guys are crazy.
From Friday 6, bring your good vibes, bring your picks. From 7 a.m., it's a dope mix. Every single thing on Friday changes with the morning fix.
Gabriel doesn't give up. If you file a case against him, he's not going to back down. And that's when you're going to need my help when that happens.
Is that so? And what do you want in exchange for that, huh?
You're really not letting this go, huh?
Fine, go on, hit me! Here, do it! Do it now if that'll make you happy!
Forever, my love.
Did you know you can open a family bank account without having to visit a branch? Simply download Pesapap app from Google Play Store or Apple Store to enjoy freedom and convenience. All you need is your ID card, KRA PIN, and camera phone.
Well, good morning if you're just joining us right now, but if you're with us, we'll continue with what's in the daily, still on the Daily Nation, looking at some of these big stories. President William Ruto is telling off the West over delay tactics. This is happening in Egypt. African delegates were dismayed by reports that a deal for rich nations to pay poor nations can only be reached no later than 2024. Remember, the issue of loss and damage, of the issue of the climate change has been quite a big talking point, and the issue of climate justice was one that was fronted to take place in the COP27 summit. Now, President William Ruto has called out the West for skirting around the issues and delay tactics in helping regions such as Africa that bear the brunt of climate change. The president further cautioning that by 2050, climate impacts could cost African nations about $50 billion. That's about 6 trillion Kenya shillings annually. And this came as African delegates on Sunday were dismayed by reports that that deal for the rich nations, who are the biggest polluters, to compensate poor nations suffering the worst of the climate crisis, can only be reached no later than 2024. Ishmael, so this is what is happening. It's quite a sad situation. It's been received, you know, it's a bit of a mixed reaction there. They're saying, fine, we will be getting to that, but not now. So you have to give us some time. I don't know. So this, I mean, climate crisis is what we're facing right now, the drought situation. Maybe in a couple of months, you're going to see flooding. But we are bearing the biggest brunt of what the biggest polluters in the West, are making this issue bigger. What is your take on this particular issue?
I think this is the problem of having a big brother with a big brother syndrome, loading it over the young brother, you know, making it look like the problems that are actually created, generated, and imposed by the big brother. Again, it's being left for the small brother to handle, because the kind of emissions that are normally emitted out in the West, in the industrialized nations, is beyond bear. So
because Africa only contributes to only 4% of the greenhouse gas
but they are
emissions.
still being told we want you to do certain things before we can implement, how African and poor nations can be assisted. So in my humble view, what Africa should do, they should devise their own natural, normal methods of how we lived as a continent. Very difficult, of course, in the 21st century, but Africa should try to protect itself and defend itself from these destructions being created by the West. That is not so easy.
But you see, the issue is that's why they're calling for climate justice, to ensure that the West pays for this, pays African countries for the loss and damage that we are incurring because of the huge pollution they're making on that side of the planet.
Yeah.
Right? So we are asking, give us that money so that we can build, we can lay a foundation to be able to deal with this situation.
I think the world order has actually turned Africa into a baby crying continent. The West feels so good when you say, give us that money, you see. So I think the policies in the globe that ensure that the industrialized nations are still calling the shots on everything, whether you talk about agriculture, you talk about water, you talk about forests. They are dictated by the West, and yet we lived literally in forests in the continent of Africa. So I think there is really much that needs to be done by African nations to create policies that in a way remove the West from being overbearing to our countries.
Right. Wakili Danson.
You see, I am laughing completely that Ruto tells of the West over delayed tactics. The questions you raise, you are begging. You are at a point of disadvantage. You have nothing. And you are telling off the funders. The West has never ever had any interest with Kenyans or with Africa at all.
But remember, this is a right, and there was a deal that was already signed.
It is a
that
right.
They should pay.
How do you compel it? Ishmael will tell you some orders are in vain. How do you compel the West to give you that money? What is the enforcement mechanism in that right?
And that's why there's a framework that needs to be
That's
signed.
what I'm saying. The framework is tilted in favor of the G7. The West and China, all the developed countries in this, they are together. Africa is a baby crying. Oh, our right, our right. But how do you enforce it? So Africa should wake up from to the reality that we are beggars and we have no voice. As we are telling off the West. They are saying they will do when they want to do it. 2024. Come 2024, they will say we'll deal with it 2026. I take Kenyans to the regime of President retired, the late Daniel Moi, when the SAP, structural adjustment programs, were brought into this country. And the president could be told, retrench civil servants. We'll give you the money. After they retrench the civil servants, then they are told, no, privatize some companies. This is the same game that President Moi was played. And when Kibaki came, he simply ignored the West and looked inside to develop this country. When Uhuru came, he simply ran away from the Kibaki politics and economics and went to China, in bed to China. Now President Uhuru has left. We have President William Ruto, who has also gone with the begging balls to the West. Let us be honest to ourselves. We will deal with the effect of climate change as Africans. We'll deal with the question of droughts and the question of famine as Africans. If we are hoping these guys are going to think about it, they will never close their factories. They will never close their factories. Because it is out of those factories that the economies of these countries are running. And who carries the brunt of all this? Africans, and in particular Kenya. Right now, Kenya has been given what to do. And what to do is not even beneficial to the Kenyans themselves. It is beneficial to the Americans. Because, for example, when they talk about they will give this money, it is similar like SGR. They will give that money, their companies will come to do that work, they will not pay taxes, they will twist us because we are babies crying. Let the president come back, leave Egypt, let us deal with our own issues as Africans. But going there to give threats.
I think a lot of people who are, activists on this front would disagree with some of your sentiments, Wakili. Arnold, let me hear from you, then we move forward.
I love extraterrestrial settings, and I do a lot of studies and looking at that. I believe that I'm not just a citizen of the earth and that we are not living alone. And sometimes when I look at Mars, it feels like we, the people, human beings who are on Mars, messed it up and ran and came here. Because that's how it looks like where we are going. Now, if you look at this climate change business that we are speaking about today, so much of it looks like it's fairy tale. When these guys meet, for me it looks like it's a business meeting of snake oil merchants. Because we do a lot of talking and there's so little that comes out of it. So as much as activists, especially the local ones, who want really to be vocal about it, but we also know that that is a business model for them. That is how their careers and that's how they sustain their lives here. Even this 4%, I so much doubt the 4% that Africa contributes to global warming. Because what is made in Africa? Literally, when we speak about the agents that are really frustrating, or rather that contributes to the climate change so much, it's just in two sectors, manufacturing and agriculture. To what role, how much does Africa contribute towards those two sectors? Zero. So we do not do so much. So this 4% looks like we actually have to be, as in a goat has been lost, and all of you, mnapakwa damu ndio ionekane, at least all of you have to be guilt-tripped. So this is what I think. I think when the president calls out the West, he is right. Because the other thing that we've really been given, it's really looks like it's a multi-level marketing thing, is this carbon credits thing. Like you plant this number of trees and then we will give you this particular money. It's not going to work. Now, to the core of things, Africa rushed, and especially we Kenyans, wanting to look like we are very progressive, we rushed into passing laws. We go to those conferences, we pick up those particular concepts, come here, pass laws. Some of those laws have slowed progress. For example, we have got coal in Kitui. Coal will be of help to actually give us cheaper energy. But people, at what cost? But people who are, at what cost? Let me tell you this. Zainab, it's so easy because we've been washed out. Yeah. Volkswagen today is one of the best brands in the world. Actually, they've always competed with Toyota, who is the best as in numbers. So Volkswagen, the biggest Volkswagen factory in the world, which is in Germany, runs entirely on coal. We are talking about Germany. Who are we to Germany? We are not. We are not anything. This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. You talk about livelihoods of our young people here. Why the cost of production in this country is very difficult is because of issues like energy, for example. We want to put up a nuclear plant in Tana River, for example. We have got 101 disincentives and evangelists, those activists we're speaking about, telling us that we cannot go that particular direction. So we cannot use our natural resources that the West has used to get to where they are. They cannot give us money on this carbon credit and this snake oil they sell to us. So we go down. The Orient on the other side, the guys in the East, have ignored that. And China has decided that they will actually have to get where the West is before they meet them on the table. So we in Africa, poor as we are, the owners of those natural resources cannot use them because we are pleasing people elsewhere. We have to shift the way we are negotiating this. And we cannot be the first people. Are you going to be here for 100 years? You will not be there, Zainab. This is my point.
But at what cost? And I mean, my question is...
When you speak about at what cost, what have you done?
When we are speaking of the livelihoods of the young people, is it important to talk about that when there will be no life in... And science, in fact, apparently proves, according to the United Nations, that by 2050, if the carbon dioxide levels continue to increase and nothing is done, it will be catastrophic.
So that is not... leadership is not one man's burden. There must be global leadership. We cannot be Africans who are not listened to on anything. They can't even listen to us on climate that is going to kill all of us. So why are we then carrying this particular burden and continue dealing with them on this particular plan? We must shift base. I can tell you, on the day Kenya, for example, explodes its first nuclear weapon, the US will listen to us. On the day we go to Kitui and ensure that the cost of production has gone down, our energy, they will listen to us. But so long as we go to get their take photos with them, we have got a photo op opportunity with them, and then have got activists coming in here and lecturing the rest of us who have done nothing. You are preaching to the converted. We Africans have not spoiled the earth, but we are the ones who are being preached to. As in, honestly, we really have to change the way we are doing things.
All right.
Zainab, you should remember what Mr. Arnold is saying actually.
Right.
Directly drives into how we choose our leaders. In fact, what he's saying is when you decide to go for presidential elections in African countries, in Kenya included, who is the person you want to put in State House? Because he is the one who will make those kind of decisions. Either he will receive a phone call and agree to take a picture with somebody, or he will insist that I must save Africa. By the way, that is partly why some people will never or do not see State House. Because if you are too much Africanized and you are going to put off China, put off the West, they will not allow you, they will not even want to hear your name.
Okay, let's move forward from this issue. And we will have to take a lesson on issues of climate change. I will take you through that. Dunstan and Arnold and Ishmael, all right?
We are ready to take lessons.
So final story here just to comment on as we move forward with the conversation. So there's this issue. We'll get back to that. Azimio, this is tying on our first page where Azimio is planning to pile pressure on Ruto over the poll promises. We see Raila Odinga there. And then there is this one. Plan to remove presidential term limit. So a UDA lawmaker has revealed plans to seek the scrapping of the presidential term limit, noting that the cap should be on age, not period of service. That's the Fafi MP Salah Yakub saying some UDA lawmakers are now working on a constitutional amendment bill to replace the two-term limit with an age limit of 75 years. Now, should the MPs have their way, they would give William Ruto, the sitting president, the leeway to seek re-election for 4 terms or 20 years. However, Ruto, who is age 55 now, has not indicated any intention to contest beyond the current term limit. Of course, that has received a number of reactions. You have the National Assembly Minority Whip Junet Mohammed saying the presidential term limit is cast in stone. You have Makueni Senator Dan Manz also dismissing the proposal, terming it as totally ridiculous. Opiyo Wandayi saying such a move would be met with stiff resistance from Kenyans. Let me begin with Dunstan Omari. So we have this issue here, age limit versus the term limit, which is already set in the Constitution. Can this sail through? Is this a ridiculous idea?
Politically, it's not a ridiculous idea. One, there was an attempt to bring age limit in terms of the apex to bar Raila Odinga from contesting. That notion collapsed. It has now been brought that William Ruto is young. He can serve 4 terms. Is that politically conceivable? Yes. The people who have politics at their control will want to live for long. It is only in this country, around here, this region, where and Tanzania, where we have regular elections and term limits. Uganda doesn't have that term limit. Rwanda doesn't have that term limit, and very many other countries don't have term limit. It is constitutional for the move of that motion to bring it within the law. It will be dealt within the law. An answer will be provided within the law, and that will be the law of this country. But the questions that we are looking at is, what is the intention of that person, the UDA team? This was explicitly very clear in the campaigns that they do not want to leave power. And the structures that they are putting in place now are structures for eternity. That we have a live president. Kenyans will resist that very viciously. Kenyans will, if people are going to be bought in parliament so that they go and pass such laws that are completely unconstitutional, unacceptable, we'll deal with those issues as we can. Is it the reason why Kenya Kwanza is rushing to be in bed with the judiciary? Ask that question. Is it the structure of the Kenya Kwanza government to lay the foundation, because the only issue will only be dealt by the courts, so that the appointment of the 6 judges, the 3 billion shillings that is being released to the judiciary is in anticipation to remove that? Kenyans be alert on the intention of, it is not even a month.
Well, the Member of Parliament says, and I'll quote what is quoted on the paper, says, we will come up with an amendment bill to try and change this because we want the requirement to be on age limit and not terms. If a president is doing a good job, then he or she should not be limited by the terms.
We agree. We agree. They are right. But the question I'm asking, Kenyans, the term of this presidency that is being extended, it is a term that all the price of unga has gone up. The price of everything is completely up. Kenyans are struggling to be alive. They are surviving. So the question that everybody is asking, to whose benefit is that term? Is this government working for Kenyans or is working for itself? It is very clear. From day one, the government of Kenya Kwanza is a government for self-preservation, not a government for the 46 million Kenyans. So we will, and I think Ishmael will join me, Arnold might not, we will deal with this question when it arises, both constitutionally and in terms of public participation, whether Kenyans want a president of the Ugandan type.
Zainab, before I join Dunstan in court, let's just crystallize something before my brother comes in terms of whether a presidential limit can be extended through parliament or through a national referendum. Right. If it's about the national referendum, 100% you know that Kenyans will not extend the presidential term limit. But if it is crafted through parliament, then they will sail through because they have the majority. So this is something that we need to watch. But I can advise for free how Dr. William Ruto can stay in State House for 20, 30 years if he wishes. Number one, if unga is 35 shillings, as it is now. Number two, if government business is not made into a club of a few, if he lets Kenyans have so much money in the pocket, if children go to school for, for free, if he can rescind this Machogu statement and say, no, we will give you education and up to university. By the way, because not many people fight to become presidents of the Republic of Kenya. There are very few, in fact, there are probably less than 10 in number, people who really seriously want to fight for State House. The rest of us are looking for, if we have enough money and I can charter a plane or, get a good air ticket to some destination and come back and continue working, that's what Kenyans want. Right. There is no indication that through policy, through proper declarations, that they intend to bring life completely down to affordability. And of course, they cannot do that only as Kenya. They do it, considering other global factors. All right.
Arnold, would you say that perhaps these remarks were sort of just to start the political port or emotions, so to speak?
Actually, just before I respond to that, it's important for me to let Dunstan know that I'm actually a decorated street veteran. I would put on a suit and look so nice and speak this English, but for the people of my generation, they know that I have worked for and with them in actually delivering things that matter to us. Moving on swiftly, so that just in case there's a necessity of us actually going back, to go back to the trenches, I am not a newbie, and I'm actually a retired general, but I can always be recalled because soldiers don't die. Yeah, they just fade away.
Viva.
So, but I need to say this. I look at this particular statement and I don't know why it is not even the headline across the country. Because also it speaks to the kind of people we have given power as members of parliament. This is the problem of electing CDF managers instead of legislators. Because a number of people who are in parliament today did not make it because they honestly were going there to do the core function of parliamentarians. Representation, legislation, oversight, budget making, and everything else. Nowadays, we just need to canvass around as a good CDF manager, because that's what a lot of them are. And but if CDF persists not to be there, I have seen now they're explaining themselves in WhatsApp groups. Those guys who never used to speak because they were waiting for CDF as a big stick to deal with the people in the constituency and ensure that they win their elections. Now, without CDF, they come up with these ridiculous, they start coming to look for relevance. This, for me, is not a priority at this particular time. A regime that has not even had itself instituted is already talking about how to extend a term. You know, he has got his Article 38 rights to speak all these manner of things, but he should also look at the country's temperature. He should look at how the country feels at the moment. People are angry. People are hungry. And you are speaking about this. William Ruto actually is a practicing Christian from what I have seen and his own confessions. He knows that Jesus did his business and checked out by the year when he was 33 years old. So I know that deep down, William Ruto understands that for leadership, it is not about longevity, it is about the legacy you leave behind. And if anything, there has always been rumor that he will be one person who will seek to extend in office. I'd like him or his handlers or anyone who speaks for him to actually come out and trash this particular talk. Because this is not a priority, this is not where we want to go. Right. But then, quickly, I need to say this. He already said, I don't know how you are going to actually extend term limits by simply going around Parliament. Even if you are to do it in Parliament, they do not have absolute majority because it's about the Constitution, right? That's am I right?
Yes.
So they do not have the absolute majority. They therefore cannot actually even go around it in Parliament. Secondly, if you are to do a referendum, I don't think you want such like disturbances at a time when the economy and the country feels the way it is. Right. William knows much better that when you bring a referendum, because many times people don't know, there is no practice for anyone who's going to election. There is no time to actually do a drill. But when you bring a referendum, even your opponents have got an opportunity to actually do a recce and then know how to take on you. We did that mistake in 2005. You know how 2007 turned out. So every time you bring a referendum, you are giving your opponents time to rehearse live. This is a live fire rehearsal. So I don't think William would want us to go that end.
All right.
So finally, on that particular issue, I need to say this. Bringing up this debate is to strengthen the opposition. I don't think William wants, he might actually say it verbally that he wants a strong opposition, but he doesn't want an opposition that will actually be abrasive, because you bring up this, then you give Raila relevance. You bring up, as in you will actually make him, even Uhuru Kenyatta will actually start looking like a saint. All of a sudden. I don't think this is wise or even safe to bring up this particular conversation. But who can stop this? The person, the object in whom this business is actually being sold for.
But he's the one who has sent this guy to tell the nation.
I doubt that the people of Fafi want to extend term limits as a priority. I do not think that the children in Fafi, the young people in Fafi, have sent these young, they do not have fees, they probably do not have water, they don't have money to eat, but they have sent their member of parliament that our priority, as you speak, is for you to go and ask for a term limit. That is not what the people of Fafi want. And definitely, I know they have not sent this guy. He has sent himself, and he's speaking for himself and probably his stomach. That's where this stops. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move forward, then we get to our conversation. What's this we have on the Business Daily? Village market eviction, row splits Koinange Keen. Daughter says case filed without consultation. Co-administrator moving to court to strike out the case. This is the issue of the Koinange family that is splitting over the petition filed last month by one of the administrators of the estate seeking to evict the upmarket Village Market Mall and the Tribe Hotel over claims the land on which the property stands belongs to them. Also, costly fuel gives electric buses a lift. Electric buses being tested on Nairobi roads are comfortable and inviting. I don't know if any of you have managed to get onto one of them. I know you have your own vehicles. Rasigo, an e-mobility firm, deployed 2 electric buses that have been run by East Shuttle and City Hopper for a pilot phase from March to test if they can compete in the cutthroat environment that is public transport in Nairobi. It will be very interesting to see their report and what really they've managed to see and if it can actually work here in Nairobi. Ruto, UK Prime Minister, agreed to deal for 425 billion mega dam, and Faulu Microfinance to close 6 branches, focus on digital road. All right, and Taifa Leo, mawaziri wa Ruto waporokwa. That is on waropokwa kweli. Thank you for that clarification. Habari kamili katika ukurasa wa pili. And here just we can see in Ethiopia, Rais mstaafu Uhuru Kenyatta na mwenzake wa Nigeria Obasanjo wakati wa mkutano wa utekelezaji wa mkataba wa kukomesha vita kati ya wapiganaji wa kundi la Tigray na wanajeshi wa serikali ya Ethiopia, and you can see them posing there. Seems like a happy man. the president, the former president Uhuru Kenyatta. So that's what we're finding on the second page, John, on this whole issue, just what we're talking about in terms of the cabinet secretaries and some of the declarations they have made so far. All right, on the East African DRC, Uhuru re-energizes a peace process. I think this is what we had yesterday. So I'll just go back to the Daily Nation. Let's look also what's on the Standard before we get to that. This is what is on the very front page of the Standard. Load of hot air. Murkomen fails to give SGR deal. While Transport Cabinet Secretary sensationally announced the government had made public the standard gauge railway contract between Kenya and China, but it turned out to be bits and pieces of the pact. Apparently, he needs Chinese permission to make it public. So we'll get to the bottom of that in just a moment. All right, let's get back to our report here. And this is what we had just held onto before we continue with the conversation. Let me get to that. So this is what will set pace for us. Azimio planning to pile pressure on Ruto over poll promises. Well, President William Ruto could soon come under pressure of his pre-election promises to implement certain pledges within his first 100 days in office and face resistance from Kenyans. Sources say, well, Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition leader Raila Odinga is reportedly working on a plan to mobilize Kenyans and pile pressure on the Ruto administration to fulfill its campaign promises as the high cost of living continues unabated. In fact, Odinga has hinted at a bombshell, saying he will, at the right time, speak to Kenyans and his supporters who are still reeling from the pain of his 5th presidential election loss on his next course of action. Ishmael, what we have a government that is just 2 months and a week, I think, into office. But the pressure is on, and you have the Azimio leader Raila Odinga taking up the mantle. He's been told several times by the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, you go to the opposition and put us on check. So he is actually doing that. So talk to us.
I think there are two ways in which we can talk about this particular story. One, Raila is getting back into his real metal. He's going back into what he's made of, and this really feels good. We keep asking why actually he did not sustain his position during the presidential campaigns. Probably now things would be different. But having said that, you know, we are not even in the 100, are we done 100 days?
Not yet.
Just about. So really, I think, and again, I'm sure the former Prime Minister is trying to just to prepare his brigades. He wants to inform people that he's not irrelevant and he cannot be really, if you read history properly. So, but the problem would be, his supporters would be asking how he comes out very, very powerful after such elections when he was supposed to be more powerful before actually the elections. So he probably could go to State House. I think people got disappointed that the former Prime Minister did not do his homework properly to put, the opposition then, to put William Ruto on check so that he doesn't go to State House. I think his supporters are still reeling in that pain of, we thought that you would actually go all the way. So, but in terms of piling pressure on Ruto, it should not be over the poll promises, because the promises were not Azimio promises. The promises were not citizens' promises. These were Kenya Kwanza promises. And therefore, if you really want to put pressure, the issue would be on policies. You put pressure on, delivering on the constitutional demands, the lawful, what the law requires. But if you're just trying to challenge somebody on his own promises, which he made, and yet it's not 100 days, I don't think people resonate with that quite correctly. What they resonate with is the Prime Minister's energy, but in terms of putting pressure, it should be on what the law says. Has that been done? I think that Raila Odinga did not agree with the promises anyway, and I don't think he's coming out to necessarily say, we want to see you do what you promised. It is about the law. It is about what the president should do today, not necessarily what he promised, because you are going to say, okay, you promised 50%. Now we want 50%. He has already elected his PSS only with 11 women. So I think that the Prime Minister will go forward to ensure that there is what is the law, there is what the people expect, and he should do, even if he did not promise it during his campaigns.
Right. Arnold, I mean, with all this pressure that is already piling on the new administration, the president said, look, give us some time and we will be handling some of the situation. Remember some of the key issues he promised, stated that under his administration, counties would receive funds from the national government on time. That is yet to happen. Odinga is accusing the head of state of trying to implement policies without going through the right legal channels. There's a lot of things that are happening here. But is it fair to put so much pressure on a new administration that says, look, we found a mess, let us fix this, and then now we start talking about the promises that we had pledged?
I think Taifa Leo really summarizes what we are trying to speak about the situation as it is. I struggled, I didn't get that word. If I had seen Taifa Leo before I did my first submission, that's exactly what a lot of those ministers are doing now. On to your question about the pressure we are giving the current administration. I think a lot of that pressure is actually misplaced because, like I said, we do not have even the structure in place. He is going in court to challenge even PSS, the PSS list, for example. He's already gone to court. So what if the court actually grants some of his prayers? It means that for the next 2-3 months, we will still be in court. We wouldn't be able to deliver. Definitely no.
So it's unfair to blame the
a number
president?
of it, I think it's too early. And also, it's not really, we have to look at it two ways. First of all, when you promise 100 days, this is not like the US where you can actually come up with your government in the next 2-3 weeks and you are done. We have got a framework, rigid. I find it quite rigid. And therefore, when politicians also promise that we will do this in 100 days, we are now going to mark the 60th day, I think. We are headed towards that end. And even government,
40 remaining.
And even government in itself is not in place. So even as we pressure them, where are you going to send money in counties where some governors went and chased away every chief officer, suspended all chief officers and the CCs that were there, even though they still would be working and they can still work for them the way William tried to work with the others for Uhuru's team. So if you are to send them money, if the control of budget were to send money to the counties, you do not have a chief officer for finance, for example. You do not have a county secretary. How is that money even going to serve people? They don't have a CIDP, they do not have an ADP. Those are the tools and the instruments for appropriation. So how are you going to do that? It's not easy. Those promises are good, but then we have got a framework. We are a country of the rule of law, like he said, and there is so much that is actually systemic that will not allow people to run around. So even as we go around, you know, it's so funny, and I think he's brought out that mildly, that during campaigns, Raila would say, these particular things will not work. They are not the right things. Now he's actually telling these people who actually were making promises that he thought were wrong for the country to now do those wrong things for the country. I'm like quote unquote wrong. You didn't agree with it. Now you're telling them to actually go ahead and do with what they agreed. Of course, that is now a question that is beyond logic because, of course, they promised, so let them do it. But you disagreed with it, now you're telling them to actually do it. So it's quite funny. For me, I think that, and you should actually correct that, it's not the Prime Minister, it's actually the former Prime Minister, because we now have got a current Prime Minister who is Musalia Mudavadi. Technically, that's what he is.
Technically, that's a Prime Minister, but in
yes,
law,
former.
that is not a Prime Minister.
No,
it's a cabinet.
He's a Prime. Cabinet Secretary. And we did away with the word minister in the olden days. So the equivalent of the minister is now a CS. So we honestly have got a prime minister, all but in name, if we were to be honest. In everything but in name. That's what he's doing, the functions and everything else. That said, on the pressure that we are putting on this particular administration, some of it is actually well placed. The other one, we are crossing the bridge before we get to it.
I mean, when we're talking about when the Azimio team says part of our plan, this is according to Wycliffe Oparanya, who's the coalition's executive committee chairperson, saying part of our plan is to have a shadow cabinet that will help our leader in our next course as well as plan and pushing for reforms we want, which will target the Electoral Commission, the judiciary, and even the executive. I mean, isn't this a bit far-fetched?
You know, and that actually really brings this point home. You realize that a lot of our leaders actually take us for a joke. And they take politics, as in what has stopped Azimio up to now from coming up with a shadow cabinet? Do they also need to take it to parliament? Do they also need public participation to come up with a shadow cabinet? They have not done that. So it's literally on both sides, no one takes us seriously. because one of those things Azimio would have done by now is actually to have a cabinet, a shadow cabinet, and they should be asking and actually providing alternatives and speaking in a structured manner. They are not. So, literally, I've just realized, after you read that, I realized that both the government and the deemed opposition are not any different. Hali ya mkeka ndio hali ya gunia. As in, these guys, all of them are the same. At least on the other side, government will say that we have got a framework, a legal and constitutional framework that is actually rigid. We can't go around, you can't vet PSS when you want. We still have a lot of steps to actually go through. But for the opposition, why don't they have these things in place? So they're already talking about 2027. They've not even given us a shadow cabinet. They've not told us how they're going to move forward, but they're telling us about 2027 and how they're going to win. Literally taking us back to campaigns.
Right.
So none of them is actually like really helping us.
Okay.
Well, the president was very clear in what he'll do in 100 days. I hope he's not going to come and say that he was also made as the DCI officers who have come saying this affidavit I signed under duress and at gunpoint. The president and deputy president were very clear what to do. They sold that to the Kenyans. Kenyans elected them. Nothing short, they must implement that. These are not strangers from us. They know the laws of putting up a cabinet. They know it. They know the laws of putting up principal secretaries. They know it. They know the law of dealing with the fuel. So any trying to cry that give us more time, nobody is going to give them any more time. The hustlers want their unga down. The hustlers want the petrol prices going down. The hustlers are holding them to account. So when Azimio pushes hard, Azimio is not telling them to do what they did. Like now, I've not had Raila Odinga tell them, give Kenyans 6,000 shillings. It was not part of the bottom manifesto. It was Raila's manifesto. So when they are being put to pressure, actually we demand more pressure from citizens because we were promised and we cannot wait. The question of asking for another leave for one more year was not part of the manifesto. The honorable thing is that if they cannot deliver, they have an option to resign. Because once you fail to deliver what you have promised, then in honor, you quit. Because you are admitting failure. So this government, if it is admitting failure, even before it has started, that they cannot implement anything, how will the opposition deal with it? My good friend has talked about Azimio having not constituted a shadow cabinet minister. It is not found in any provision of the law.
They promised.
It is not found in any provision of the law.
They have promised.
As what we are saying.
We've seen Kalonzo Musyoka speak about it a couple of times.
That's what I'm saying. It is one, a statutory requirement? No. It is a gentleman's issue? Yes. How the opposition will want to deal with it? They might say, we have only 3 shadow cabinet ministers. That's Raila Odinga, William Kalonzo, and another person, Kioni from Jubilee. But this one has the mandate. These ones have the mandate, constitutional mandate, to deliver to Kenyans. The opposition has no constitutional mandate to deal with the prices. So what we are telling this government, and I've heard them every other time, they are under pressure to implement their manifesto. They are saying, Raila did this, Uhuru did this. For example, you see now, the SGR, I don't know whether we'll be coming to the SGR.
Yes, we will.
We'll be coming. So in my own view, what I'm trying to say is that let these people sit down. Let them govern through the mechanisms provided by the Constitution. The waziris who are, Taifa Leo got it wrong. Those waziris are talking on behalf of their principle. Hawajaropokwa, that is government policy. Let us not, when you see waziris talk, a cabinet minister talking, that is a cabinet resolution. It can't be like an MP who is talking from Favi. So that is government policy that has been discussed, that has been approved, And that is the policy. Kenyans must live with it.
Zainab.
Any form of trying to justify that it is an accidental slip of the tongue does not exist.
Zainab,
yes, the bed that we have made, we must sleep
on it. My brother Omari, when you talk about appointing, shadow cabinet ministers, and then you say that Raila's role is not constitutional. By the way, having a strong democracy in a nation is a constitutional requirement. And therefore, having an opposition properly structured and putting the government in shape, you can actually, except in letter, say that is a constitutional mandate of the opposition to come up, to stand up, and protect the people. But Zainab, and with tremendous respect, I mean, I think it's all over written and known that I supported the Azimio agenda. I support the former prime minister. But you've recently seen luminaries from ODM trying to run away. I think from Kisii I saw Ongwae, I saw Ongera, Janet. They are going away. Why? I don't know. These are people, life members of a party who should not. So for me, the responsibility of Raila Odinga to explain how does somebody steal your socks when you are wearing your shoes on, that is his first mandate. He should explain to his supporters that, gentlemen, I am still your leader. I will make it, but what happens is A, B, C. If that doesn't happen, several people will actually walk out of ODM, will walk out of Raila Odinga. And because of the vastness, massiveness of Raila Odinga, sometimes he does not realize that quite a number of flesh has been lost from his own body. So we must first explain to the supporters, this is what happened. Then he must bring them now together and say, we must put the government in check. Before that is done, I mean, people need to understand how are your socks stolen and you're wearing your shoes.
Right. We have to take a break, but Arnold, you wanted to add to that point, but just to note here that, just a quick comment here from Osman Ado Ibrahim saying, pressuring the government now on election promises is like a newlywed asking his wife where the baby is. Give it reasonable time.
I actually think he captured it much better, because you see, here, Omari will tell you very forcefully that we are a country under the rule of law. And that we must adhere to that. But then he also tells you that these guys must deliver on their things within this particular time. So honestly, we can't speak from both sides of the mouth. We must allow William to actually, first of all, put his government in place the way it's dictated in law. Because there is even room, he is already in court, other people are also going to court. Nice. Like one of those things that I'm actually aggrieved about is actually Article 27.8, that it's not reflective. At the CS level, we would have understood. But at the PS level, I still do not understand why we could not meet the threshold of a third. And by the way, the funny thing is that it's men who actually are speaking about this very loudly.
All right.
So let us also, as we pretend to put pressure, because we are not putting pressure on William, that's the truth. As we pretend to put pressure on William about him delivering on some of these things, we should also come off as people who understand that he's going to deliver with a fully constituted government.
Okay, so just hold on to that point. All right, so you just hold on to that point. We have to take another break. When we come back, we will continue with the conversation on Ruto's executive shift and, of course, looking at some of those policies. Hashtag, as always, is MLive and TV. Talk to us. We'll be back in a moment.
Are investing in the next generation of tech dreamers. Together, we harness the power of innovation. The Family Group Foundation is the anchor sustainability body for the Family Bank Group.
Unajua deadline ya ku-update details za line yako inakaribia? Safaricom imekurahisishia mambo. Sasa unaweza jiupdatea maelezo yako chini ya dakika 2 kwa website ya www.safaricom.com/account/KYC upload, au utembelee duka la Safaricom au agenti wa M-Pesa karibu nawe ukiwa umebeba kitambulisho au pasipoti yako original ili usajiliwe kabla ya tarehe 15 Oktoba mwaka huu. Epuka kufungiwa laini. Safaricom.
Kwa nini kunichenga chenga? Miaka mitatu kule Japan.
Kidogo tu.
Usomea kudunga watu.
Utamu tu.
Sindane.
Jamani, tunachenga mpira ndani ya gumzo la Sato.
Sitaki mzee aliezeka. Nataka kijana. Sasa ni
kazi wewe una vita na nikueleze.
Bila utakuota kidogo.
Ngoja. Hata mimi.
Tukijadili masuala yanayokuathiri wewe katika jamii.
Hii ni sura yangu na hii sura imeolewa.
Na mambo mingi kwa ndoa ambayo hayahusiani na mapenzi peke yake.
Penda kweli, lakini pia tumia bongo.
Naloogopwa kusema na wengine Frida twaliweka wazi.
Huyo mwanamume wa kizungu akaja na pupa, mwisho akabakishwa na kachumbari na maavocado.
I might be a burden to her. Like she'll be feeding me like
Huyo babu mimi namuelewa. Anajua anakoenda. Chiro hata afadhali ungeniuliza ngepale ndugu yangu mdogo. Ombea.
A boy who became a fan, who became a player, who became one of Barcelona's greatest. Gerard Piqué really did live the dream. But the dream is now over. Piqué retiring and finishing his career as he said he would at Barcelona. The dream has been lived, the career fulfilled.
Did you know you can open a family bank account without having to visit a branch? Simply download PesaPap app from Google Play Store or Apple Store to enjoy freedom and convenience. All you need is your ID card, KRA PIN, and camera phone.
All right, thank you for staying with us. Let us continue with that conversation, certainly just looking at some of the moves that President William Ruto has made in terms of policies, and we continue with that. Let me just point out something here in the paper, very interesting. This is by political commentator Javas Bigambo, says, although it may not be so much about vote of no confidence in his predecessor, the decisions, however, might be implying that when he was serving as deputy president, he could have been providing several pieces of advice that were not heeded. Further, given the kind of treatment he was subjected to in the second term of the administration, he could have developed some serious scorn for things that happened during the previous administration, even though he was part of it. Ishmael. So when we're looking at that, I mean, it sort of gives credence to some of these, the direction that President William Ruto is making away from the previous administration and listing all those things, and they're quite very, sensitive policies.
Yes. I think, like I said earlier, and I will just like your viewers to appreciate the fact that these reversals are not necessarily bad. Every government comes in and it must take a decision, either policy-wise or as its, its rallying points, to ensure that they will deliver to the people what they have promised them. Regimes normally, by the way, when they come up, they make several changes in whichever way they want, and it's not new that we are seeing certain things happening around the SGR right now. It is not new. Even China knows. Everybody knows that when a new government comes up, they can decide, we don't want to do these things. They can change policy completely. Even if there are existing agreements, they can change policy. Yes, we'll have to deal with the consequences, but a government cannot be bound 100% by certain decisions made by a previous regime if they are not keen about implementing those regimes. And you will understand that multinationals, when they come to do businesses in certain host countries, they are aware that if regime changes, we are likely to lose on this or that item in our contract. So these you saw, for example, some of the reversals are not good. You saw Ruto, reversing the port from Naivasha to Mombasa. I don't agree with that one. But he had promised he would do it. He has reversed it. There are several other, things he wants to reverse, like, a million shillings in the bank. You have got to take all agreements from your mother's ID, grandmother's ID, and all that. Some of the issues he's trying to reverse are actually correct. Number two, he was part and parcel of the team that made some of these policies. But of course, he was number two at that time. And number three, we know that after the handshake, alitemwa. So coming in now to say, no, we will reverse this and this and this, is not necessarily all bad, because I think it's coming from an eagle's eye view, where he knows that this one, we went wrong, this other one, we probably went wrong. But when they are doing these reversals, we should see them come out clean and in a honest way, like they are trying to say, we are going to show you the SGR agreement, Mara again, they are not showing everything.
In fact, let's move to that conversation, right? So just the other day, we saw the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Kipchumba Murkomen, who presented that document in public, posted it on Twitter, and said he'd sent the document to the leaders of majority in both the National Assembly and the Senate. But then looking at some of the issues coming out from that document is that it had no details of the collateral, and most of the people who've combed through that document saying that is not the contract that we were actually looking for. Those are just bits and pieces of the entire document.
They're just saying,
so what does that mean?
Yeah, the Minister for Transport should not pull out some pages which we really want to see. We want to see who signed, we want to see who negotiated it. That is all there in the main contract.
But he's made it public that it has been quite a hard task to even get a hold of that particular document.
And there are several issues by there that come up in this. We are soon going to realize that the problem was not Uhuru Kenyatta, and the problem will not be William Ruto either, and it has never been Mwai Kibaki. The problem are technocrats you surround yourself with. While you will say the buck stops with the head of state, which is true, in the working of a government, once a person has been, a responsibility has been delegated, the way that person socializes with the agreement, the document, and then they decide who is going to sign. Is it the principal secretary who is going to sign? Of course, it's the accounting officer of the government. And then the other technocrats around the PS, these are the culprits. These are the people you actually call cartels. If they decide we are going to hide a document from the minister, they will actually hide it for the longest time possible, because some of them take it home to the bedroom and lock it in the safe, and it's a government document. I mean, you saw Trump, being followed and found that he's actually keeping quite a number of documents in his bedroom. So we must, at least for the viewers of Nation TV, let them understand. Sometimes you just blame the person who has the overall responsibility. But if the person comes in and says, look here, gentlemen, even me, I'm held captive. Yes, it is bad to say like this, but it is true, and that's what you saw Uhuru Kenyatta trying to talk. So while the Jubilee government went into this agreement, and at that time the deputy president was William Ruto, now is the head of state, they need to even forget the agreement. They need to come out and say, by the way, sorry, citizens, there was a clause on this, we don't see it. There was another clause on this, we don't see it. The collateral schedule where they had actually already put the Mombasa port, Mombasa port, I think.
The Kenya ports, right.
That they should tell us, because they participated in the negotiations. So just to come and show us some pullouts and say, oh, this is the deal, probably again people might misunderstand the Minister for Transport.
Let's hear from Arnold. And I mean, there's that issue of the fact that this document is still supposed to be kept out of the public view, because there is a clause on what they're calling a secrecy agreement. I believe that's what they're calling it.
I think we must laud the new CS for Transport, the Honorable Onesmus Kipchumba Murkomen, for actually taking the bold step. You might not, in this country we really love conjecture and a lot of mysticism. Now all of a sudden people say this is not the document that was signed. Some people are actually even declaring, we had seen this. Where had you seen it and you had not made it public? People who cannot even keep a gossip are telling us they already had seen this in other spaces, but they had not put it out there. So let's laud Kipchumba Murkomen for actually going out and actually putting this document out for two reasons. Actually, on a lighter note, let me tell you this, that, this is an older an older agreement that we had not even laid our hands on. There's this small matter about the Azimio agreement that has never been found, and it's not even in China. It's just on Waiyakiwe at the register of political parties. Somehow, even principles in that particular agreement, I have never seen that particular agreement. Do you know how difficult it is to find that? We should actually laud Kipchumba Murkomen. If the people of Azimio have not seen the agreement they signed at KICC when all of us were seeing, how easy is it then to actually see an agreement that was signed between Kenya and China in some locked room? So let's laud Kipchumba Murkomen for actually doing this. And for me, it's for two reasons. Number one, Article 35 of the Constitution, access to information. You know, with the kind of Bill of Rights that we have, the regime of Bill of Rights that we have in this particular country, some of these arguments cannot hold water. It goes to actually say that the people who sign and append signatures and even negotiate on behalf of this country sometimes are not really schooled in the laws that run this particular country. How did they expect to keep this thing hidden forever? This thing is not even about military, for example. It's not a national security issue. So somewhere you find a clause that this thing should not be put out there to third parties. These people...
But it is bound if, for example...
Look at this. Under what? Under the law of Kenya, it is an anality. Kenya is also a signatory to OGP, the Open Government Partnership. And among the commitments Kenya has made at the OGP is to make commercial and the tendering processes open, including making oil and gas contracts open, everything open. You just go to the OGP platform and see the commitments we have made as a country. So even as we signed these, we knew too well that we have got Article 35. Then we have got our commitments to the OGP. We are an open government. This wasn't going, and there is nothing so
then
big.
where does that leave us? Where does that leave us as a government, as a country, when you have already that the confidentiality and disclosure of the content?
That particular confidentiality is an anality before our law. If you were to look at Article 35 in its entirety, that particular attempt at confidentiality does not apply to our law unless they create their own Kenya with their own constitution that doesn't have Article 35, doesn't have our commitments to the OGP. As in, there was no reason in our laws in Kenya on why this particular thing should actually be kept secret. But then what I was saying, what I was speaking to is this. The people who sign these agreements and negotiate on our behalf, where even arbitration has to be done in China, that it is subject to the laws of a different country. You are signing this thing on behalf of the Kenyan people. And Article 1 of the Constitution says all sovereign power belongs to the people. So Kenyans are not third parties to this particular thing. You cannot say that Kenyans are third parties in that particular process because we are funding it. It has been signed in our name. It becomes a difficult argument. I would really love to see how the Chinese and any other person would actually try to argue that out, that Kenyans here are actually third parties. It's not possible.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's hear from Dansan. I mean, very interesting. This seems to be spilling over from the Jubilee administration to now the Kenya Kwanza administration.
Jubilee government came into power 2013. This contract was signed in 2014. Raila Odinga was not part of this. The handshake was not there. 2014, this is when this contract is being signed. That time, the two brothers, the president then and the president now, were like this, very close-knit. So you cannot run away, the then deputy president cannot run away that this thing was done behind his back. Raila was busy being tear-gassed by Matiang'i and being chased all over. He was not part of government. One fundamental question Kenyans have got to do. Number two, what is the net effect of this disclosure to the Kenyans? That's to me where I'm concerned. It is very populistic and political-wise, the Kenya Kwanza government has pulled a rug very fast. But what are the consequences to Kenya? One, when a contract has an undisclosure clause, then you move forward and disclose, immediately the aggrieved party will move because there's a breach. And either Kenya, China, what they will do, they will recall all their loans, just like a bank.
So what position does that leave President
Ruto?
So
that's what I'm saying. What position is Wanjiku, the hustler, going to be left? China is not going to be excited China will invoke the clauses within that contract, record the loan. We don't have money to repay. Number two, look at other countries that we have signed contracts with. Globally, we have signed contracts with almost every other country. Now, they are going to develop, they're going to have jitters. Is our contract going to be exposed? Is it now going to be to the public gallery? These loans that we get are not favoring Kenyans. We are beggars. And that one, Kenyans must agree to that. When you walk to a bank, these banks that are here, they give you a document that is prepared. Then you are told, either sign here or walk out.
And isn't that what at least the president right now, the current president is trying to correct?
Very well. Right. The president has now come out to correct that. We support him. Do we have our money? He's now in Egypt. We are begging. Do we have our money? I remember there's a time we gave, I don't know which country, was it British Airways that gave, banned the British Airlines coming to Kenya. We also said, we will not take Kenya Airways to Britain. Who are we? Let us agree our status that we are struggling people. We cannot meet these superpowers. And let me tell you, this disclosure is going to have a ripple effect on any multilateral agreements. It is going to be, the Article 35 was there from 2010. When these agreements were done. Are these agreements signed by the Minister for Finance, then Cabinet Minister for Finance? Yes, Henry Rotich is the only minister. The Cabinet CS for Treasury is the only Cabinet Secretary with executive power to bind Kenyans to that. Is Kenya Kwanza trying to say they will not pay this? We must pay.
They have not said that.
What I'm saying, right, is the direction this thing is going is trying to say this is an illegality, there was no public participation, we will not pay.
Just give us a chance.
The contract as it is,
we'll
pay.
Yes, let me hear from Arnold, then I get to you.
Yes. You know, there is something we call the Albert Einstein's parable of quantum insanity. Normally, the literature part of it, the literal part of it, normally we love to say that doing something the same way and expecting different results is insanity. You know, we cannot keep on doing things the same way. We claim for respect on the global platform and still reason and sound the way Omar is sounding here. That we are beggars, that we have to break our own laws and bend so that then we meet the other part of the world. We are not going to get there with the respect. Besides, you know, you can't tell us that we are going to pay loans with so much of interest up there, and we still have to bow, knee and all, to these things. Omari must also accept one thing, that we are a sovereign nation. We have got our own laws, and that we live in a world that is an open. The OGP, the Open Government Partnership, for example, has got 135 countries.
All right.
We cannot have laws applying to the common mwananchi, and then they do not apply to other people. And that is why, for some of us who have actually argued, is that if we are withdrawing cases for people who are politically correct, then we should also withdraw the cases for the people who are down there. The same even applies at the international level. So we had Article 35. Unless you want to tell us that Article 35 counts for nothing, that our Bill of Rights counts for nothing, that our commitments to the OGP counts for nothing, Kipchumba Murkomen has said very ably that we are willing to continue. What we want is to renegotiate. Number two is that we are a country that has got its own rules.
All right.
And that one of it is that these things should be open. There is nothing that we are holding back.
Okay.
It is in this secrecy that corruption is actually brewed, or rather bred, or bred. It is in this secrecy that inefficiency is hidden. It is in this secrecy that we end up paying loans that we do not know. We need everything open so that we are not getting into traps that we do not know. So I do not think, and we should not be selling fear to Kenyans that China will actually recall its loan. Was Omari there? Have the Chinese spoken and told Omari that they will recall their loans? They need the interest. They need their influence here.
All right.
They can actually protest, but chini ya maji. They cannot recall their loans. They
hear.
will not be here. Actually, as in,
right.
that selling of fear, we should not, tusiuzie watu uoga. Sisi sio taifa la watu waoga.
Let's hear Ishmael very quickly.
It is very easy to trash this agreement, even at the arbitration center in China.
Right.
If you can demonstrate that there was either malafide or there was corruption. And by the way, corruption is punished in China more severely than in Kenya. So all our government needs to do, Kenya Kwanza government and Murkomen, is to say that we even fired Rotich because of suspicion of such corruption and fraud issues. So it can be trashed. But I think so that China will save itself, they will go into let's negotiate. We agree, let us renegotiate. So it's not an agreement that should really scare us. Number two, it is true what Arnold is saying, we are not a third party in that agreement. I think third parties are US, Britain, Italy, other competitive nations with China. The only reason why it was to be kept secret was so that it does the commercial secrets are not revealed to those competitive countries. And we are not third parties.
All right.
We are the one of the agreement.
Thank you. I think we're going to have to end it there. Ishmael Nyaribo, lawyer, political analyst, Arnold Maliba, public policy expert, and Dunstan Omari, lawyer, political analyst. We certainly don't have much more time to discuss this, but look, we'll continue to comb through that document and get more details and certainly be asking more questions on that contract. Well, this is where we wrap it up on AM Live, but Winnie Lubembe is now joining us for Your World. Winnie, good morning.
Good morning.
What do you have for us?
I mean, listen, every time I come here with your conversations, I know we want to continue with the same, but
there's always never enough time.
There's never enough time. And of course, today on the conversation, we want to talk about something that is equally important, and that is, when it comes to education, especially for children with special needs, there's an aspect of inclusion that is always missing when we talk about education for special needs. So that is what we want to really analyze today. Why is it so important, and how can we also use the community to, promote the same, that is inclusion when it comes to education for special needs.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Winnie, for that. Looking forward to that conversation. All right, my name is Zainab Ismail. Thank you so much. Let's continue talking online. The hashtag we're using is MLiveMTV. Good morning and good day.